Hello and welcome to the CUFI UK podcast for Zion's sake. My name is Alastair. This is Alex.
Hello.
And in today's podcast, we're going to be discussing the story of a 12-year-old Jewish boy who doesn't like Hamas and is now being investigated by counter-terrorism police.
Yeah, shocking. We're also going to be looking at Turkey and how Turkey refused to help an Israeli plane that made an emergency landing in Turkey. We're also going to be looking at how this shows the animosity there is between Israel and its neighbours, but how Israel shows the biblical principle of loving thy neighbour.
That's right, which is why we're also going to be debunking all of these falsities about Israel not doing enough to help Palestinians in Gaza, when in fact it is doing so much. So we're going to reveal the truth about aid to Gaza once and for all. So Alex, today is polling day, when the country goes to the polls to elect the next government of the United Kingdom. Now, as we're doing this podcast, we don't know the results of the election.
Yeah.
And very likely those who are watching and listening after the 4th of July already do.
Yep.
So we're still in the dark as we're doing this. But, and we still need to vote, of course. We need to make sure we vote. But it does mean that we're not going to be discussing UK politics in this podcast.
Yeah.
But what we are going to cover are some very interesting stories. And we're going to begin by a very troubling report about a 12-year-old Jewish boy who is under investigation by counter-terrorism police. Why? Because he said that he wanted Hamas to be destroyed.
Yeah.
He said this at school. Now, wait a minute. Hamas is illegal in the United Kingdom. They are proscribed as a terrorist organization. And he, this 12-year-old Jewish boy, was reported through the Prevent program by the school because he said he wanted Hamas destroyed.
Yeah. It's crazy, isn't it?
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And not just that, but to have a visit at home by the counter-terrorism police.
Yeah. I know. It is beyond our understanding. It beggars belief, as they say. And yes, he has every right to say what he said. And Hamas is a terrorist organization. Therefore, the UK government is against Hamas.
Yes.
The counter-terrorism police, they should be cracking down on terrorism and terrorist offences, not...
They should be trying to destroy Hamas.
Yeah, they should be trying to destroy Hamas. Exactly. They shouldn't be cracking down on people who are against terrorism.
No.
They should be cracking down on terrorists. And I think this just shows how broken the system is. I think it shows there is probably a bias within, the school for reporting that. The teacher or the students, whoever reported that.
Well, the parents have said that the boy has been at the receiving end of anti-Semitic bullying from other boys.
Yeah.
One of the instances that they explained was that in the changing rooms, they pointed out at PE the showers and asked if that reminds them of the gas chambers
at Auschwitz.
Yeah. And also did Nazi salutes as well. That's one of a number of anti-Semitic things. I mean, horrible things. And really, if anything, that needs to be investigated by the school. But very, very shocking. When the counter-terrorism police visited this family, apparently one of the questions that they asked was whether, they asked the parents what their view was of Hamas.
Yeah.
I don't know what answer they gave, but look, Hamas is a terrorist organization.
Yeah.
Not only that, but they also confiscated, wait for this, a toy crossbow. Now, crossbow sounds very serious, okay? But a toy crossbow purchased from English Heritage.
Yeah.
Now, if you've ever been to like an English Heritage tourism gift shop, you will know you can buy bows and arrows. You can buy plastic or wooden swords, and you can buy plastic crossbows. Well, this was one of those.
Yeah.
And the counter-terrorism police confiscated it. Why? Did they presumably think that he was going to destroy Hamas with it? We don't know. But it is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And the counter-terrorism police should have better things to do. We know they have better things to do, including countering some very, very grave and serious problems that we have with the threat of terrorism in this country and with the support of Hamas, which we're seeing expressed in various ways, including on the streets of London.
Yeah.
And yet it is a 12-year-old Jewish boy who has expressed his view, which he is entitled to.
Yeah, exactly.
And actually, I stand with him on that.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, we want to see Hamas destroyed. And if the police want to investigate that, they are welcome to do that because we stand by it.
Yeah.
We want Hamas to be destroyed.
Yeah, just don't mention you have a Nerf gun.
Yeah, I know, exactly. I have a few Nerf guns. I have trained my children how to shoot those Nerf guns. I'm not sure if that...
I have a water pistol.
Yeah,
But we will go no further than this podcast.
Exactly.
But no, we are against Hamas.
Yeah.
Okay. And this seems to be perhaps something which is conspiring among boys. They say boys at the school. This is their wording of the parents. It sounds so. It looks like it is a setup. And the reason why they visited is because of concerns of radicalization of the child. Again, it shows a broken system in how we're dealing with terrorism in this country.
Yeah, I think as well. I mean, look at this. This is a Jewish child who is the victim of anti-Semitism. He's also the victim of Hamas because Hamas, their whole purpose is to wipe out Israel, to destroy the Jewish people. Hamas leaders have called for attacks on Jews around the world. So this is a victim of a terrorist group, if you look at it that way, or a potential victim, I should say. And the counter-terrorism police, instead of protecting him, they have victimized him. So they've wrongly treated him, and yet he is someone they should be protecting from Hamas. And like you said, there are people on the streets of London showing open support for Hamas, chanting from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, which is a call for the destruction of Israel. Those same people there's a lot of anti-Semitism within those rallies, within the groups that organize those rallies. They are the people the counter-terrorism police should be dealing with, and instead they're dealing with the Jewish boy. And I think that's atrocious. And I think as well, it probably shows how there is a problem with the Prevent system. The pro-Palestinian anti-Israel groups for a long time have been saying that, or accusing Prevent of being Islamophobic because it primarily targets Islamic extremism. Well, newsflash, Islamic extremism is the cause of the majority of terror attacks in the world, and including in this country. Yes, there is far-right extremism, there are different organizations, and there's terrorist groups within pretty much every religious group and with every political group sort of thing. But unfortunately, Islamic extremism, Islamism, Islamism, is that the right word? Islamist extremism. They are, the predominant threat to, a lot of people. And so that is why Prevent primarily targets them. Unfortunately, because there is this big sort of false accusation that goes on against the Prevent system, which, by the way, is not a perfect system. So I think there is some things to fix there. I think there's this sort of backlash to it where people who are left-wing minded, which is probably quite a lot of people within the schooling system, I think they are then reporting people to the Prevent system who are not the people that it's geared up for. And I think they're sort of, from my understanding, I think there might be an undermining of the system going on from people there. I mean, for example, there was another boy who was also 12 years old who was investigated by counter-terrorism police because he said that there are only two genders. Clearly, that is not it's not a terrorist thing to say. It's not nowadays, I guess it's a radical thing to say. But he was referred by the school. Well, it shouldn't be a radical thing. I see you sort of reacting to that there. It shouldn't be seen as a radical thing. That is the way God made it. There are two genders, male and female. But the thing is, he was referred by the school because the school were concerned that he was at risk of being radicalized by the far right. for just stating a simple fact about nature. And so I think this is the thing where when you have these far left school boards, far left teachers and so forth, I think everything to them seems to be, everything that opposes their worldview becomes extremism. And I think they're trying to exploit that through this system.
And also really it calls into scrutiny the freedom of speech as well.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, both of these examples are statements, but they are also an expression of their belief.
Yeah.
And you know, in the instance going back to the Jewish boy, I'm just going to read you here because the mum said that regarding some of the students, she says they asked him if the PE changing room showers reminded me of the gas chambers. They sang Nazi songs to him so loudly that teachers must have heard it. And then the boy's mother, who did not want to identify the school her son attends, said that the safeguarding lead at school asked him a few weeks ago if there was anything on the news that was upsetting him. So he was asked a question.
Yeah.
If there was anything on the news upsetting him. The child is understood to have said, "I'm concerned about Hamas. I think Hamas should be wiped out. They are terrorists." And this remark was in a report to school. So even the fact that a child was asked to express what they might be grieved about, which was a route to something which was possibly productive and helpful for the child, then resulted in a visit from the counter-terrorism police.
It's wrong on so many levels. And I think as well, like, it makes you wonder, like, going back to what I was saying about the sort of worldview of some of these people, is it because he mentioned Hamas? Is it because some people have been duped into thinking Hamas is good? You know, the Hamas represents the Palestinian people and this sort of thing. And actually, is it then like a counter thing where, you know, we obviously see chants of "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free" as being an anti-Semitic call for Israel's destruction? What if the twisted worldview became, well, he wants Palestinians to be destroyed? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
I wonder if there is that kind of thing. But you're right. Like, he is a vulnerable child who is a victim of anti-Semitism. Like I said before, I see him as a victim of Hamas. Or at least a potential victim, and the school should be there protecting people like him. They gave him an opportunity to express himself and they exploited that. And then now he's probably feeling even more vulnerable because even the school around him isn't protecting him from the evil of Hamas. And that is atrocious. The counter-terrorism police should be ashamed of themselves for that. This is only at the moment being reported by one media outlet as an exclusive. Hopefully it will get further out there. GB News is the only one that's actually covering this story, and it's from a few days ago now. So I'm just shocked this hasn't been picked up by more news stories because this is, atrocious. It should be heard far and wide, and that's why we're raising it on the podcast in the hopes that more people will understand the problem that is out there. Because this just should not happen.
We are calling upon Christians across the land to sign the Christian Pledge for Israel. We want to demonstrate the overwhelming support that there is for Israel and the Jewish people, to show them that they are not alone. So please go to www.cufi.org.uk/pledge and add your name. We want to demonstrate to Israel and the Jewish people that Christians in this land stand with them. But we need your help. Let us pledge together to stand with Israel at this time. Okay, so moving on to our next topic, Alex, and an incident involving an aircraft flying from Warsaw to Tel Aviv. This was an El Al plane. It was flying destination Israel and had to make an emergency landing in Turkey. This was because of a medical incident on board. And as is the case with medical emergencies that happen during the flight, the aircraft had to find the closest possible destination to land so that the individual could get treatment. So they landed in Turkey, and whilst there, first of all, the passengers were on board for several hours not being able to take off. I don't think that is unusual. But what was very unusual was that the plane needed to refuel in order to continue its journey to Tel Aviv. And basically the ground staff at this terminal refused to put fuel in the plane.
Yeah.
So then the problem went from the runway to diplomatic level, because it should be pointed out that since the Israel-Gaza war, Israel has not been able to fly directly to Turkey. So the diplomats, the Turkish government, discussed the matter, and they refused to give consent to the ground staff to refuel this plane.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible.
Ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, one of the things to note here is that, Turkey is run by Erdogan. Erdogan is extremely vocal in his attacks on Israel. And I think that it shows kind of the society there is when an Israeli plane is refused fueling, not just by the ground staff, but also by political parties who got involved to ensure that the plane could not be fueled.
Yes.
And I think, this is El Al is the Israeli airline. It has the Israel flag on it. It is a very Israeli-looking plane, so the ground staff would have seen it immediately, recognized it, and obviously that's, why they refused it. But this was a medical emergency.
Yes.
I'm guessing, if that was an Israeli on board, he is now, or he or she is being treated now in a Turkish hospital to be looked after there. So obviously they've not refused that, but refusing the rest of the plane, all the other passengers there, if the plane couldn't refuel and take off, then, what would happen? That would be a massive issue there. But thankfully, Rhodes in Greece, which is obviously a neighbour of Turkey, they allowed the plane to fly there, did a hop over the water to Greece, was able to refuel and then carry on its journey back to Tel Aviv. But this, again, shows just how anti-Semitic some of these governments are around Israel. Now, we know Turkey, for a long time, has been a sort of, let's say, not so warm with Israel in terms of its ties. There was actually talk about a strengthening of ties in the last couple of years. And we at CUFI have actually been very wary of that. We've been warning people not against it as in we don't want it to happen, but actually we just don't trust that. And I think it's evident now. In February, Turkey dropped all trade with Israel. Erdogan has repeatedly said, anti-Semitic things, calling for the retaking of Jerusalem, calling for Israel's destruction, all these sorts of things. Like, he, in my opinion, is one of the key people to look out for in the future in terms of enemies of Israel, because he is an Islamist. He has hosted Hamas in his own country. That, like, apart from Qatar, Turkey is the second hotspot for Hamas. In fact, actually, there was a poll I saw this week, actually, which was looking at where Gazans want to go. I think, around 35% of Gazans want to leave Gaza. Obviously, it's not very good there at the moment. And the top destination is actually Turkey.
Not Scotland, then.
Not Scotland. No, Turkey and then Germany. And
so the injury there is that the former leader of the Scottish National Party offered. But just
obviously
explain.
I don't think any of them are too keen on the colder climate. I think they'd like to stay in the warm. I love Scotland, by the way. Just putting that out there. but yeah,
I see this whole big dog in front of us. Let's just move on.
Yeah. So, but yeah, with the Turkish officials, there is a lot of anti-Semitism there. I think as well, like, as Christians, we need to look at it as, there is the Hagia Sophia, which is, was a key church that was taken over and then turned into a mosque. It's things like that where I think we do need to be very wary of Turkey, and especially Erdogan, because he has said a lot of things which are problematic. But yeah, to see this anti-Semitism coming down from government all the way down to a person at the fuel pump refueling a plane, I mean, it just shows that anti-Semitism, anti-Israel perspectives are very prevalent within that country. And I think that's very dangerous. I think, obviously, this situation could have just been averted if there was a bit of friendliness from neighbour to neighbour.
Yeah. And it started actually with one individual. There was one person who refused, and then the actual fuel workers, none of them would do it. So there was. It's crazy how, but you're right that it filters down to ground level.
Yeah,
it's very, very worrying. But also, let's be mindful that just last year, February 2023, Israel helped Turkey following the earthquake there.
Yeah, exactly.
In fact, Israel was the second largest contributor to rescue, help, aid following that earthquake.
Yeah,
Israel is always giving, always has a heart to help. It removes political barriers when it comes to wanting to support real people who are affected by real disasters, real challenges. And Israel is, the best in the world at doing that.
Exactly.
And yet Turkey, the Turkish government, is, by snubbing Israel in this way, it is appalling, really.
It is appalling, yeah. And like you said, I mean, in March 2023, the IDF, so not even Israel or Israeli civilians, it was the Israel Defense Forces, the army, sent a 150-person search and rescue team. Like you said, they are some of the best in the world. Actually, the UN rates their field hospitals as the best in the world. They're the only country in the world to have I think it's an S rating or something in their field hospitals. The UK, America, and so forth, they're the level below them. And yeah, it's one of the best in the world. They set up one of these field hospitals. They rescued 19 people who were trapped in the rubble, and within 24 hours, they'd set up a field hospital, which went on to provide medical support for hundreds of people in Turkey. And so this was, just over a year ago that this happened. And, Turkey has never repaid that sort of love towards Israel. In fact, they're doing the opposite. And I think it just shows the, loving your neighbor that Israel has, and yet it is painted as this evil monster that's destroying the region. Well, actually, Israel is a light in that region, and it is the only, the only nation in that region actually that puts out those rescue teams very promptly around the world whenever there's a disaster. And obviously, right now, the IDF is dealing with Hamas, they're dealing with the Houthis, they're dealing with Hezbollah. So it's unlikely that a medical team is going to be going out from Israel at this time if there is another disaster. But I can assure you, in the future, I'm sure Israel's hand will be open to help Turkey if needed. And yet Turkey can't even,
refuel
a plane. It's absolutely atrocious.
Yeah.
Moving on now to the next subject we wanted to talk about, which was again about actually Israel loving its neighbor. And I think, like we've been saying before, one of the things that Israel is accused of doing is, being this horrible, malicious entity that wants to wipe out Palestinians and destroy, people, and this, that, and the other. It's accused of ethnic cleansing. It's accused of genocide, all these different things. The truth, it could not be further from the truth. We know Israel has one of the most moral, if not the most moral, militaries in the world. They're doing everything they can to limit civilian casualties on the Palestinian side. And one thing they are doing is literally feeding the people of Gaza and helping to avert what could be a dire humanitarian situation in Gaza. It is less so because of all the efforts Israel is doing. And I think, we really need to highlight how much aid Israel is providing to the Palestinian people, because it is quite...
Well, the accusation
positive,
is that Israel needs to do more. Israel is not doing enough. We're hearing it, particularly in the political sphere, time and time again, almost sometimes deliberately to compensate for the rightful condemnation of Hamas. You often hear, we condemn Hamas, but Israel must be doing more to provide aid for the Palestinians. And often, by some, even characterizing the situation in Gaza as being the starving Palestinians. You hear that rhetoric a lot. Now, let's be honest, there are Palestinians in Gaza that are suffering at this time.
Yeah.
But last week, the White House actually stated for the first time that Israel is not to blame for the problem of aid getting to the people who need it. And when I say problem, let's just explain what this problem is right now, because it has been in the news. There are over 1,000 containers, lorry containers, that are yet to be collected by the United Nations, and they are on the Gaza side of the border. Israel has done its job in fulfilling the request to basically transport this aid, and it's international aid, much of this, what we're talking about, is aid provided by different countries, all different international aid organizations. Israel has facilitated it, and right now, Israel is knocking on the door of the UN and saying, what are you doing with this aid we've delivered? Thousands, in fact, there are aerial shots, aerial videos of just line upon line upon line of aid pallets, which have not yet been collected by the UN. And the UN, at the same time, back in the where the powers that be are accusing Israel of not doing enough, and Israel is saying, "We've done everything we're required to do. Why have you not picked up this aid?" And it's sitting there now. The UN aid agencies are saying, "Well, it's too dangerous. There's this and that." The various excuses, but look, right now, in some of the most dangerous parts of the world, such as in Sudan, okay, where aid agencies are being attacked, the UN is working in some of the most hostile places in the world, and yet Israel has done various things. It's provided various routes. It has put various measures in place in order to try and assist in partnership with the UN to make sure that the aid could be delivered safely. So at the moment, the blame is on the UN. Israel has done everything it can, and the White House has admitted that.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, if you want to read some of the numbers as to how much, since the beginning of the war, how much aid has been delivered.
Loads. I mean, literally. Right. We're now, I mean, we did this report last week, so there are now hundreds of lorries which have gone across the border since. But basically, there are 36,000, just under 36,000 humanitarian aid trucks that have been facilitated by Israel into Gaza. Now, I did the maths on this. It is just over 500 miles. So if you were to line all of those lorries back to back, or front to back, rather, line them all up, it would go from Plymouth to Glasgow in one long queue. I mean, dread the thought. Okay, one whole line. That is how much aid lorries Israel has facilitated. That is over 500,000 tons, included food, water, shelter equipment, medical supplies, fuel. And by the way, on fuel, okay, is the UN puts in a request for Israel to deliver fuel, okay, on a daily basis. Okay, UN gives the nod, Israel supplies. In May, there were 14 separate days when Israel never received a request for fuel.
So almost half the month.
Yes. Almost half of the month. And Israel has basically, I mean, they've even gone to Twitter to publicly demand the UN to please let us know what we need to do. And if you go on to COGAT, which is the agency, Israeli government's agency that oversees the distribution, the transport of humanitarian aid across the border, they have a running daily report on how many trucks, how many pallets, and is sort of taking the UN to task for them to do their job. In delivering this aid.
Because I mean, what you're saying there as well is the UN has been complaining that there's not enough fuel, and at the same time not asking
for it.
And Israel is actually saying, look, we can provide you more. You know, basically there is no limit to how much we can deliver, but it's up to you to, first of all, request the fuel, and second of all, to actually deal with the stuff we've given you so that you can provide it to the Palestinians.
Yes.
I mean, another amazing factor that you wrote about was the fact that Israel has set up in the north of Gaza bakeries. I think it's 6 bakeries, and they're providing 1.5 million pita breads every single day.
Yes.
So Israel's providing all the flour, all the yeast, or whatever it is they need to make all the stuff. They're providing all the equipment and running these bakeries to provide almost a pita bread a day for each Palestinian in a way. And, you know, I think looking back at, you know, what was being said, I think it was at February, March time, or earlier in this year anyway, when the UN put out a report saying that there was a risk of starvation. And immediately Hamas propaganda arms said 10 children have starved to death from malnutrition. Only 10 it happened to. And suddenly, once the media changed and the UN changed its forecast a little bit, they stopped pumping that propaganda out. I mean, one of the videos I saw was of a baby that was on a hospital bed that was dead, apparently. I mean, that, you know, the allegations there that it was that. It was a baby that could not eat solid food. It would have been breastfed, right? It was surrounded by people who did not look malnourished in the slightest. It was, you know, tragically, I think a baby did die. It was probably, you know, maybe died at birth or something like that. But what I'm saying is they used it as propaganda to try and make out this is one of those starving babies that died from this, you know, incident. Well, look at other incidents where there's been wars, where there's been starvation, where there's been like proper malnourishment of children and things. For example, Yemen, between 2015 and 2018, there was a military blockade by Saudi Arabia and its allies against the Houthis in Yemen. In those 3 years, 85,000 children died.
Wow.
Starved to death.
Wow.
That is what really happens when a military cuts off the supplies and starves children to death, right? Now, we're not accusing Saudi Arabia of doing that on purpose or anything, but that is the result of what happened because 2 warring factions against each other, you know, were not providing food for civilians, right? The Houthis obviously took over by force. They didn't have any established sort of setup there. And bearing in mind, by the way, Yemen has about 1,000 miles of coastline. There was easily enough coastline for the UN or any other nation to start sending ships in and providing aid, but no one did that. No one cared about the children of Yemen. They let 85,000 of them starve to death. In Gaza, there's been allegedly 10 children who starved to death. I don't think that's true. I think it is propaganda from Hamas. And since that time, there has not been a single report of starvation. There has been reports of malnutrition, obviously. There's been reports of food insecurity, which is the main thing. Right now, Gaza is relying almost entirely on the imports from Israel.
Yeah.
So there is full food insecurity.
Yes.
But that is not mass starvation or famine, right?
Yes.
And so what I'm trying to say is look at the difference there. Look at how the world reacted to Israel. Look at how the world reacted to Yemen.
Yes.
Right? Or Gaza,
absolutely.
I should say. Gaza and Yemen.
And the world is dependent upon Israel to facilitate it as well.
Yeah.
And there have been reports, right, even today, there have been reports by a number of key anti-Israel figures on social media who are reporting about border crossings being closed, etc., etc. No, all of the border crossings today are open.
Yeah.
And they have been open. They've only temporarily been closed when Hamas has fired rockets in the direction. But even that has been maximum 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
They are all open. I think the one at Rafah probably, I think, is closed. But all the main crossings at the moment are open, right? Now, I said to you that there were almost 36,000 humanitarian aid trucks reported to date since the war began, and that figure was taken 2 weeks ago. And they're happening daily. So we know that figure is even more. But look, they're also being, it's not just the land borders, but also by sea, a small number by sea. But when you think that President Biden paid $320 million, £255 million on that well-publicized building of a floating pier. Do you remember that?
Yep.
That facilitated 135 trucks.
Yeah.
And then there was a storm and it drifted off into the ocean or whatever. It became unplugged, unanchored.
Crazy.
Right? 135.
Yeah.
And in total, we're talking about more than 36,000 trucks that have crossed over land. And yet there was all of that publicity on that failed project. And also, we mustn't forget air, because to date, there have been over 9,500 pallets of humanitarian aid that has been dropped by Israel over Gaza in 118 airdrops. Most of those pallets included individual meals. Some of that aid was actually from Britain and from other countries. There have been neighbours. Like I saw this week, there'd been a delivery on behalf of Morocco, for example. Other Muslim majority countries who are depending on Israel to facilitate, and they are.
So Israel's been providing aid into Gaza for years. Like, it's been helping to feed the Gazan people, being the facilitator of that aid for many years, and it's continuing to do that. And I mean, when you said that statistic about the Gaza pier, where they spent $320 million for 135 trucks. Is it 135? I think the number's
it was. I mean, there was the storm, and then it started breaking apart and drifting out.
So that's like over $2 million per truck.
Yes.
That is absolutely insane. But I think that goes back to the propaganda war there is against Israel. I mean, that was billed as like the lifeline for Gazans, and yet it has done literally nothing. Like, that is a big waste of money. It was all, I think, the Western way of demonizing Israel, making Israel look bad in the world's eyes. And shame on them. Shame on Britain. Shame on America. Shame on anyone who put forward that notion that Israel wasn't doing enough. And that they were the grand saviors, because ultimately Israel is the one who's doing the right there. And all we've done is undermined them as our nation, I should say. Or, the Western governments, the UN and so forth.
And all of this, Alex, whilst Israel is at war with Gaza.
I know.
I mean, I understand that there's a principle of it being the right thing for Israel to facilitate international aid to get in. But when you consider that their very own people are there held hostage in Hamas, by Hamas, in Gaza, with all of that, and the severe persecution that Israel received at the hands of Hamas on the 7th of October, Israel has responded militarily, but it has also responded principally with and rightfully with a care and an acknowledgement of an obligation to be able to facilitate aid for the Palestinian people. Israel is not against ordinary Palestinian people who are there, who need feeding, who need shelter, who need water, who need fuel. And yet, some of that, we're quite certain, is falling into the hands of Hamas. And yet, they continue to do it. They are vilified by the international community. They are slandered by the international community. They are treated appallingly by the United Nations. And yet, what do? They continue to transport those lorries. They have to stand so much nonsense. And yet they continue to do what they are asked to do.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the thing as well, where you look at the result of what Israel's doing. I mean, they were condemned internationally when they took all the crossings, the Rafah crossing into Egypt, and they managed to locate a number of terror tunnels and all this sort of thing. There was an international outcry that Israel was choking off Gaza completely and that there would be no aid coming in from the Egyptians. There were reports after that when Israel took over the Rafah crossing, the prices in Gaza went down. Now you think, hang on, prices, aid, this is free aid given from around the world. Well, Hamas was controlling that aid, selling it for extortionate rates to the people of Gaza, who were then having to buy free aid off of Hamas. Well, when Israel stopped Hamas from doing that, because literally the Rafah crossing was controlled by Hamas on the Gazan side, so all the aid that was coming in there was going straight to Hamas. Once Israel took over that and stopped Hamas controlling it, the prices went down. And Palestinians were posting, Gazans were posting on social media, look, it's great that Israel's actually got here because the price has gone down for all these essentials. And I think the other thing we need to point out is when it comes to Hamas, Hamas has mastered the art of using the Palestinian people as human shields. And there's been reports from Israel where they found weapons within schools. Obviously, we know they've used hospitals. Every facility they could have used, which is civilian infrastructure, they have used it for their own aims. And there's even incidents where there's been terror tunnels found underneath the cribs of babies. And I think about this. It's, Hamas hides its weapons, its rockets, under its own children because they care more for their terrorism than they do for their own children.
Yes.
When the crossing, I think it was the Kerem crossing, came under fire from Hamas because Hamas tried to, damage the crossing to stop aid coming in. The pier, when UN officials were investigating that pier, it came under rocket attack from Hamas. The UN themselves, witnessed Hamas trying to blow up the pier. And yet, obviously they still blame Israel for that. And yet Israel did everything it needs to do because Israel cares more for the Palestinians than Hamas does.
Yes.
And anyone that's out there on the streets of London, New York, wherever, showing support for Hamas, calling for Israel's destruction, they care less about the Palestinians than Israel does.
Yes.
Israel is doing much more to facilitate aid into Gaza than any other country is, right? And yet the Palestinians are Israel's enemies. And I think that just shows, the heart that Israel has. And like I said before in the podcast, like we believe Israel is, one of the most moral countries in the world. It's one of the most moral militaries in the world. And I think they're proving that time and time again. And even if the devil, spreads these lies, even if the world is deceived and duped by it, we know the truth. And the truth is, Israel is doing way better than most other militaries have. And even in recent years, using that example of Yemen, Saudi Arabia was supported by the West. It was supported by NATO. The missiles it used when it attacked, school buses and so forth, like the number dead in Yemen was far higher because of a military that wasn't as moral as Israel.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
And yet the world didn't even condemn because the world didn't care. As soon as it's Israel, Satan is out there to rob, steal, kill, and destroy. Satan's aim is to destroy Israel, to destroy the nation that God has blessed.
Yes.
And you can just see the spiritual warfare that there is.
Yes.
And yet Israel, time and time again, is proving the world wrong. It's proving Satan wrong. It's actually countering all the lies just by being the way Israel's always been, which is, a light to the nations.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, just so that we can be absolutely clear, these are big numbers that we've spoken about the 500,000 tons and the 36,000 lorry loads of humanitarian aid. But I just want to look at today then. Okay, because I've not planned this. So I'm just going to have a look at how many's gone today. And just so that people understand that we're not just picking a good day, okay? If we go onto the Kogut Twitter feed, they give a daily report. It's normally a few days behind. So the latest one, if I just look on here, the latest one is daily report is 2nd of July. On that day alone, 269 trucks carrying humanitarian goods were transferred to Gaza today. They had 15 coordinations for humanitarian missions were requested of them, and all were approved. All of them were approved. 14 were carried out, and 1 was cancelled by the organisation. They also, in addition, had 6 tankers of cooking gas, and they had 1,000 blood units as well as other medical supplies, were transferred to Gaza from Jordan. So it's from Jordan. Israel facilitated it. 1,000 blood units. That's just one. I just wanted to give that as an example, just as a snippet, to show that if you visit the reporting on any given day, you will see statistics like that.
Yeah.
Proof, evidence. And the world needs to know it. The world needs to hear it, just to realize how much Israel is doing. And also, again, to recognize that the UN, just think, 1,000 truck loads, not the trucks, but the pallets, okay? 1,000 lorry loads of 1,000 lorry loads of humanitarian aid is currently sitting in Gaza, waiting to be distributed by the UN.
Yeah, exactly. They need to do their job. Well, to close, I think I want to raise a biblical principle which I think Israel is applying here. Because obviously, we believe that Israel is acting in this way because of its, Jewish heritage. We are Christians, so obviously there's a Judeo-Christian heritage there. And one of them is obviously to, love your neighbor. And we kind of think of that as actually a New Testament sort of thing. It's obviously what Jesus told us. So Matthew 22, verse 37 to 39 says, Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. Well, actually, this is an Old Testament principle as well, because obviously God, Jesus, they're the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so Leviticus 19, verse 18 says, do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against anyone among your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. And this also is in Proverbs 25, verse 21 to 22. Your enemy is hungry, give him food to eat. If he is thirsty, give him water to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head, and the Lord will reward you. And this was also repeated in Romans 12, verse 20, which says, on the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head. So that's obviously in Proverbs and in Romans, the exact same scripture there. But I think it is just one of these principles. I mean, Jesus again in Luke 6, 27 to 28, he says, but to you who are listening, I say, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you. So I think it's that principle that we have of loving your enemy, loving your neighbor. Well,
Jesus in Matthew was actually referring to the law and the greatest commandment. So,
true.
He was asked, what is the greatest commandment? He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind. This is the first and the greatest commandment. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. It says on these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets.
Yeah.
So he was reaffirming the Old Testament law. He wasn't contradicting. He was reaffirming it, renewing it, reinstating it, reminding his followers of these two principles that are kingdom principles.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think that's what Israel is doing right now. It is, just think if Hamas. If Hamas had invaded and taken over Israel, and they would not be treating Israelis the same.
No.
We talked about Turkey. They couldn't even refuel a plane, let alone, after Israel's helped them with the earthquake. There is a different standard that Israel has. Israel is not like its enemies. And we are also not like, the enemies. And I think this shows like the good versus evil, the light versus darkness that there is. And so I just wanted to raise that because I think, it just goes hand in hand with what we've been talking about today.
Yeah, absolutely. We want the things of the kingdom to be our main focus and our main motivation. Of course, we have a love for Israel because, well, not only, but I think the pinnacle is because God loves Israel, right? And so we want to love God with all our heart, all of our soul, and all of our mind. Why would we want to be against Israel? Why would we want to be against his brethren, the Jewish people? Why would we want to turn against the things which he's considered precious, that he has set apart, that he has chosen, that he has blessed. Why would we want to turn against all of these things?
Yeah.
As Christians, we need to align ourselves with kingdom principles.
Yeah.
And as you say, that can involve loving our neighbor as we would ourselves.
Yeah.
And as Christians, I think the more we understand kingdom things, the more we see evidence of it in the world.
Yeah.
The more we see the things, like the more the more that we understand the light, the more that we actually are able to identify the things of darkness.
Yeah.
So we see in Israel, in this very sort of humanitarian way, we see a glimpse, we see something of the light that God has promised that Israel would be. We see a glimpse of it. We don't see necessarily everything that Israel does is perfect, but we see something different. We see something that is in contrast to the darkness, and we like it.
Yeah.
Because we like the things that God has sort of shown us to be right.
Yeah.
And to be truth.
Yeah.
And so we love Israel, we support Israel, and we say to Israel, in the midst of such horrendous slander and persecution and hate, you're doing a good job.
Yeah, exactly.
And we stand with you.
Yeah.
And we will stand with you. And so, as Christians, let us renew that call to stand with Israel and the Jewish people at this time when there are so many lies and there are so many sort of misunderstandings, but also there's a very deliberate agenda at trying to undermine the things of God and to undermine what God says about Israel. We know that the state of Israel is in the firing line for the darts of the enemy, but we are raising up a shield of faith. We're raising up a shield together as a collective group of Christians here in this country and around the world who have said that for Zion's sake, I will not remain silent. So thank you for standing with us. We appreciate your support. We're encouraged by it. And if you are listening, watching perhaps for the first time or first few times, and you thought, well, I'd like to know more about this organization, Christians United for Israel, then please visit our website at cufi.org.uk. And on there, you will find all about our work in wanting to make a stand for Israel in this nation, but also in how you can support us through a donation to be able to do what we believe God has called us to do. We depend upon the generous support of our supporters. And so please do consider by visiting our donation page at the link on the screen or in the link in the description. And thank you for standing with us for such a time as this. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, forward, however you're listening or watching to this podcast, so that we can make more people aware of the need to stand with Israel and hopefully something about the truth that we are sharing and imparting and discussing together. Alex, it's been good again. We look forward to the next podcast. Please join us. And until then, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Bye-bye.